Ashely, thanks for joining us. Tell us about your journey into the vaccine space. What sparked your interest?
Well, like many other people, I had caught glimpses of there being a vaccine issue over the years. Like, I remember seeing a Jim Carrey and what's her name? Gosh, why can't I think of her name? Jenny
McCarthy?
McCarthy.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. On the news, doing their protests. I also, in 2011 or 2010, I was pregnant with my son, and my mom got me the Dr. Sears book called The Vaccine Book. And that book was a pretty neutral book. It definitely didn't discourage vaccination, it definitely encouraged doing them, but it gave you a lot more details on ingredients and things like that. And like maybe which vaccines to go for instead of others, right? So, for example, the Pediatrix vaccine is a combination DTaP plus hepatitis B plus polio. And that one's given at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. But that one also has the most aluminum of any other shot that is on the schedule, right? And so I remember reading that book and thinking, gosh, I want to avoid that one. So I was looking for just DTaP. They also wanted to give rotavirus and other ones at the 2 month visit, right? And actually, I had delayed and waited until 4 months to bring my son in when I was finally, I had my child. That visit ended up kind of, I don't know, it started a chain reaction, I guess, because I had requested just a DTaP only shot because I was still kind of scared of pertussis at the time. There was whooping cough outbreaks that year that we were more aware of. There's probably whooping cough outbreaks every year that we don't necessarily hear about, but certain years is maybe a little bit, there's more of an agenda to scare people about these things, unfortunately. So I bring my son into the doctor's office. I request a DTaP only shot. The nurse was really pushy with me, wanting to give him rotavirus and the other ones that he was due for. And she came back, she was rolling her eyes at me. She gave him one shot, and then I find out a month later he had gotten Pediatrix. So she had slipped in there because it was one shot. She didn't think I would notice the next month when I had asked another nurse, what has he gotten? Or she said, it looks like he's gotten this one. And I said, no, that's not right. Right. But yeah, he was given a shot I did not consent to. And just as time went on, I ended up getting him Hib and pneumococcal, both which contain aluminum. And he started developing weird, symptoms. He was doing this head tick thing. And at the time, it just stopped me in my tracks. It's like, you're with your baby 100% of the time. You know what's going on with them. You know when something's out of the ordinary. And 3 days after his Hib and pneumococcal shot, he started with this head tick. And it was like his eyes were rolling up. He was laying there on the ground and he was just kind of doing one of these things. And that just, it like I said, it stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, something is wrong. I just intuitively felt that. So, but I still didn't connect it at the time. I did not connect it to the vaccines because it was 3 days later. Most people seem to think that, vaccine reactions have to occur within like 15 minutes, and that's just not the case. So anyway, I didn't connect the dots until much, much later, but my son had developmental delays. He couldn't speak more than 2 syllables at a time until after he was 2 years old. It was very interesting when my daughter was born. My son is about 2 years older than my daughter. And I didn't get her any vaccines because at that point I knew better. I had begun investigating the issue a lot more in depth. And, I'm talking about looking at the published research. I'm not just looking at mom blogs. I'm not just watching YouTube videos, right? I went to the published medical research and I wanted to see it for myself. And that took a lot of time. And I became almost obsessive about it because I felt like, okay, I have my second child. I don't want to make the same mistake. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And by the time I had her, I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing any of this. It felt, it was shocking to me, everything that I had learned. And so, when I went into learning about vaccines and trying to investigate them, I figured there must be some kind of happy medium, right? Between the people who are super anti and the people who are super pro, who are like, no vaccine is safe, they kill, 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 right? And all vaccines are good, safe, and effective and necessary, and you need to get them or you're going to die. So I looked at the issue like, there's got to be a happy medium here. Like, I'm a reasonable person, right? There's probably some risks. There could be some benefits, right? There's probably some that are safer than others. There's probably some that are more effective than others, and all of that, right? But years down the line, my perspective is completely different, and it just took that kind of that diving deep into it to really learn just that motivation. A lot of people don't have it. And plus, as a new mom, you're overwhelmed by just trying to be a mom, and dads as well. It's like, okay, so now you have this new baby, your wife is consumed, and then you're still trying to work, you're still trying to do all of these things and just support the whole process. It's a lot. It's a lot to investigate. And it unfortunately is on moms and dads to do this because no one else is doing it. So I guess it's a long story, but that's kind of how I got into it, for sure. My son is vaccine injured. We've done a lot to help him over the years, but his health has always been kind of a balancing act. And my daughter has been basically fine.
So you have that real world experience. And you mentioned the phrase safe and effective, which is the phrase that's repeated by medical professionals, the medical industry, the media, and then especially during COVID, politicians. And we recently interviewed Roman Bystrianyk, who is the co-author of Dissolving Illusions.
Right.
And so we delved into the longstanding myth that vaccines are responsible for the decline of or elimination of certain so-called infectious diseases, i.e. the effective side of that refrain. And your work seems to examine the safe half. So in addition to that real world experience, which you had with your son, like what did your research unearth regarding vaccine safety?
Well, I'm sure that you have come across this before, but basically no childhood vaccine has ever been tested for safety in a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial. So that's the gold standard for basically all pharmaceutical drugs that are out there. They give one group a placebo, which is basically a sugar pill or a saline injection. It's supposed to basically trick the person receiving it, the participant, into not knowing, am I getting the drug or am I not getting the drug? Because we know that there's this thing called the placebo effect, that if you believe that you're getting something that can help you, then you might actually be benefited by that. And vice versa, if you believe you're getting something that's going to hurt you, you might actually experience negative effects. And so the whole point of having a placebo control group is to eliminate the placebo effect and make sure that the people who are receiving that experimental drug or placebo don't know, so that any effects from whatever they're receiving is not going to be because of their mind playing tricks on them, for example. It's going to be able to give you a very good comparison between what it would be like to get the drug or vaccine versus what it's like to not get it at all. Okay. And so then when you give these two groups, the placebo and the experimental vaccine, then you'd be able to compare, okay, how many adverse events did the people in the placebo group have? And how many adverse events did the people in the experimental vaccine group have? And that's the only real honest way to do a study or a clinical trial where you can actually determine what the adverse events are compared to background rates, compared to nothing, right? But no childhood vaccine has ever been through that kind of testing. And so, like, for example, the MMR vaccine did not have like a control group at all. They just tested it on about 1,000 kids and they accepted whatever the adverse events were. They essentially were like, well, this isn't that bad, so therefore it's worth it, right? Even though they didn't really know the real world effectiveness of the MMR vaccine, they're just accepting and assuming that any risk from these vaccines are worth whatever benefits that they provide, right? And that's just, it's insane to think that they're just assuming that any benefits are going to be, they're going to override the risks. And so Nowadays, like for example, a new DTaP vaccine, they will just compare the new DTaP vaccine, the experimental one, to an old DTaP vaccine. And when they see that, okay, well, there were this many kids that died and that many kids that died in this group, therefore it's about the same, so it's safe. Okay. And but they never tested the original DTaP vaccine or diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccines against a placebo to know, like, if there are more children dying than would had they not gotten the vaccine at all. So and then apply that to every other adverse event like ear infections, pneumonia, Guillain-Barré syndrome, paralysis, convulsions, all of those things, right? So um, it's all based on assumption. And there's a really good book that I was going to recommend called Turtles All the Way Down. And that book, I'm sure you've come across it, really dives into that in the beginning. Especially they cover the fact that no vaccine has been tested against placebo. And the interesting thing is that their excuse for that is that it's not ethical to not give a child a vaccine, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. Again, it's based on this idea that vaccines are totally safe and effective. And if there are some of you that might get harmed by it, well, it's worth it because clearly the vaccine is going to save you from dying. So if you end up having, a sore arm for a few days, then it's definitely worth it, right? So there's that. I mean, that's like a huge one in and of itself. Just the fact that they've never tested them properly for safety is like, how can anyone say these are safe? We're literally testing them on the general public. Like, our children are the experiment, right? No one signed up for this. They just assumed that it was safe because otherwise, why would the FDA license them, right? But they don't have to prove it's safe, first of all. And then second of all, obviously, there are a lot of ingredients in the vaccines themselves that are known to be harmful, can cause serious adverse effects. And, some of those ingredients like aluminum and the thimerosal were never tested for safety prior to their use in vaccines. So it's like the whole thing is really just mind-blowing when you first start to look into it, because you just assume that, like, if these were made available and they are made by the drug companies who are known to have been convicted of fraud on multiple accounts. The top 4 vaccine manufacturers are like, they've all been convicted of fraud. And you would think that the FDA would be doing their job and regulating them or investigating what they're doing in order to make sure that these vaccines are safe, but they made excuses all along the way. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and there's just this history of people who work for the FDA to go on and get jobs at these drug companies or be on the board or what have you. If we can just flash back to that 4-month visit, when your son was given that shot you didn't consent to, was that illegal? Do you know?
Technically, I don't know that there's a law.
Right.
I mean, doctors are supposed to provide informed consent. And they're supposed to do that, but that never happens. And I just don't know that you can sue them for that.
Right.
Because you can't sue them for any adverse event if they give a vaccine, because all the vaccines are proven safe and effective.
Right.
And they've accepted that sometimes it's unavoidably unsafe,
right,
because there's always going to be, that small percentage of people, that 1 in a million, which is totally ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
The vaccine package inserts themselves that are written by the manufacturers state that adverse events for some of these vaccines are like 2.9%, 8% for serious adverse events. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like 1 in 15, 1 in 30, 1 in
Right.
40, 1 in 125. And then you're talking, we're going to get 72 doses of these vaccines, right? Yeah. And it's like, so this whole idea of, it's 1 in a million is absolutely, that's just,
it's preposterous.
Propaganda.
Yeah.
It's literally just manipulation. Because, yeah, a serious adverse event, in order to be defined as a serious adverse event, to be included on the package insert under that label, it has to be a life-threatening event, hospitalization, an event requiring hospitalization or life-saving measures, or death. So that's not just like, oh, I have a sore arm. Oh, I've got a fever, an ear infection. You know what I mean? Like it's nuts. So um sorry, I hope I answered your
No,
question.
no,
What was your
that's
question?
fine. And there's almost, as Amanda Vollmer says, and we quote often, run screaming from their system. And it's almost like by nature of walking in those doors, there's an implied consent because you're there.
Yes.
And that's what they do. And we were told directly that if we were going to question the vaccination schedule or even opt for a different route, we weren't welcome at that practice. So in a sense, there's your implied consent.
Right.
Yeah. What about you? You mentioned that your daughter has had uh, a better road health wise. Can you tell us a little bit? Because you've been looking at your two children, and no one would know better than you. How has that manifested? What have you noticed?
Right. So, and that one's actually kind of a story too. I cannot prove it, but I believe that she was given the hepatitis B vaccine in the hospital
No kidding.
without my consent.
Yeah.
Okay. This is just standard practice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember signing anything, at the time. I was still a little bit new to like the procedures that you have to go through in order
Right.
to make sure that they don't vaccinate your baby while you're in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
But she was perfect. She had a great AFCAR score. She was like so happy. She breastfed really easy. She was ready to go, right? We were about to leave the hospital. They took her back to do those heel prick tests and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then my husband comes back to the room and says, they're transferring her to the NICU. We are going to have to stay. We can't leave. And I was like, what the heck happened?
Right.
Like, she was fine. I don't understand. We were about to leave. I was packing up our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, her oxygen stats started dropping. She could not keep her oxygen levels up. They were dropping into the 80s, then into the 70s. They didn't want me to breastfeed her. She was turning purple when she would breastfeed. It was really terrifying at the time. They didn't know what was going on, right? And she was in the NICU for a couple of weeks. I didn't even think about maybe they'd given her the hepatitis B vaccine until much later. And the pediatrician I ended up going to when she was about a year old, he said to me when I explained this, he said, that sounds like a hepatitis B vaccine reaction.
Mm.
And at that point, I had done a lot more research on it and said, oh my gosh, I think they gave her that shot.
Right.
Like, I'm pretty darn sure they gave her that shot, even though I had tried to decline it. And anyway,
That's
it
unbelievable.
kind of just confirmed my suspicions, right? Yeah. But since then, thank God, that was the only shot that she has gotten, if 100%, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty darn sure that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened. And otherwise, though, she did have one febrile seizure when she was 4. It was short and mild, and I think it was it was scary. It was scary, but it did not affect her long term, thank goodness. And otherwise, though, she hasn't had any health issues whatsoever. I did end up doing some genetic testing on both of my kids because I had suspected with my son that maybe he had this MTHFR gene mutation. Have you come across that before?
Yeah.
Yeah, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. It, encodes for an enzyme, and it basically, in a nutshell, reduces your ability to convert folic acid to folate, and you need the folate in order to eventually produce glutathione, and glutathione is our main master detoxifying antioxidant, right? So it's critically important to be able to produce enough glutathione. But some people who have this mutation, this gene polymorphism, and actually 60% of the population has one copy, and about 10% of the population has the homozygous 2 copies of C677T. And my son, I thought, yeah, he probably has 1 copy. No, he has 2 copies, and so does my daughter. And it was very unsettling to find that out, because that just means that both of my kids are extremely susceptible to vaccine injury. Like if they were to have been vaccinated on schedule, very scary thought for me as a mom. But otherwise, like I said, she's been really healthy. I haven't had really hardly any concerns with her. Sometimes I give her some magnesium if she can't sleep very well at night, right? My son, on the other hand, is, he's had so many issues. He basically had all the signs and symptoms of autism on a mild to moderate level, depending on the issue, right? And he's come out of it. But it's so funny. He is 13 now. And even though most people would not know, they would not know at this point that he was essentially on the spectrum, he will still do this sometimes. He does that like self-stimulatory behavior where he's like, gotta get this out, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, to see that. It's funny and it's not funny, right? But I'm so thankful that he has recovered quite a bit. We changed his diet dramatically. I just didn't know any better when it came to certain things when, I was pregnant with my son. But when he was around 4, we changed his diet dramatically. And it was like he was a different kid 6 months later.
I'd love to hear more about that. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So we first, we tried to cut gluten and dairy for a long time. And he was such a picky eater that we would be like, we can't do this anymore. We need a break. And it'd be exhausting trying to just get him to eat other things. And so we had this time where he would kind of like seem really well behaved and really calm and really do well. And then we would just, be so exhausted from trying to get him to eat healthy foods that we were like, okay, well, we look, you can have that scone or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden he would have these outbursts of, just almost like rage. And I don't know, he was just in distress. You can tell he was in distress. And so we'd be like, man, I think we need to really get, strict on this diet again. And then finally my husband was like, look, I can't keep doing this. We need to make sure 100% that like this is an issue for him. So we basically did like a stool test on him. We checked for gluten, dairy, soy, and egg. And because those are like the most, like common allergens or intolerances that people can have. And sure enough, came back that he basically had issues with all 4 of those, some more than others. And so we were like, okay, we're going to do this. We're just going to commit to it. We went like strict, none of those things. Went organic. We took out all processed sugar, all food dyes, all of the things. And he started eating a lot more fresh fruit because that was the only thing we could get him to eat that was like healthy, whole food, right?
And he's quite young at this point, right?
Right. He was 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so thankfully he would eat fruit at least. And so we just kind of went with that. And we tried along the way to get him to eat more vegetables. And, I would hide vegetables in things and, come up with all kinds of new recipes so that I can like get him eating healthy, getting food tasting good that actually had good ingredients. Right. And yeah, in like 6 months, it was like he before that, he would have severe stomach pain. At like 3.5, 4 years old, he wouldn't want to play. He would be in so much pain, like discomfort in his stomach, that he would sit on the couch and like curl into a ball. And that is not normal for a 3.5, 4-year-old boy. It's just not normal. And he'd wake up with stomach pain. He would go to bed with stomach pain. He'd wake up in the middle of the night with stomach pain. And it wasn't like every single day, all day, right? It was just clearly certain things that he was eating was the problem. And also he had eczema. He had a lot of eczema on his like ankles and legs. Oh yeah, he had eczema as a baby too. I think that was after he was given the hepatitis B vaccine in the hospital, covered in eczema. But the other thing is he was very emotionally like not receptive, not receptive, not responsive. It was like somebody would get hurt and he would just, go about his day, kind of be in his own little world, right? He was very much in his own little world. And even though his sister had just been born, a lot of older kids that have younger siblings that are, when they're born, they're like, oh, look at the baby, look at the baby. They're either like, wow, new baby, or they're like, no, like me,
Right.
mama, it's me, like they don't really typically take a side, right? But they know, they're aware of the baby and there's some attention given that to the baby. Not with my son. It was like, he was kind of just, I don't know, like doing his own thing. And I was like, this is so strange. That was part of my, like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But, and there were a lot of other symptoms that, like, man, it's been a while. So it's hard for me to remember all the different things, but I just remember those ones sticking out to me the most. And about 5.5, 6 months later, once we cut all of these things and he was eating a lot more fresh fruit and just healthier food in general, it was like, I remember seeing him, like, I'm going to cry, cuddle up to his sister, like actually look really happy and cuddling up to his sister. And, his little sister was so happy that he was giving her attention and they were just smiling and laughing together. And I was like, oh my gosh, this has literally never happened before. Like,
Wow.
literally never happened.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he was like, if I got hurt, he seemed like, are you okay, mama? Like, it was like out of nowhere.
Wow.
And his eczema went away, right? His stomach pain went away. I mean, it was, and it like makes me sad to think of how many kids like are suffering and are kind of trapped in this brain fog of, it's inflammation, right? That inflammation in their brain that is just, I don't know, causing that disconnect almost. And man, it's like a whole new side of my son came out, and it was really amazing to see, and definitely like life changing. So
Wow. But besides the diet, were there other protocols you were pursuing?
yeah, we did like Epsom salt baths with
Mm-hmm.
him because I knew that the aluminum from the vaccines basically displaces magnesium. It kind of gets in there and it can cause damage to neurons. And the magnesium is critical for calming the neurons. And so he was definitely magnesium deficient. He was very susceptible to developing tics, and he still kind of is, because of that aluminum in the neurological system can kind of cause that repetitive firing of your neurons if he's not getting enough magnesium. And especially during growth spurts, oh my goodness, when the body is just burning through all of its resources for growth, that's when I've noticed like the tics resurfacing and things like that, because it's like, wow, he needs like a lot more nutrients when that's happening, right? But thankfully it hasn't been like really more than that. But that's kind of like one of the first signs for him. But yeah, so the Epsom salt baths, we did do some probiotics short term because I had looked into certain strains that were basically missing from kids that had autism. Okay. And so there's several studies that were done where they had, I thought this was interesting. I guess they didn't do this on children at the time. It was a rat study or mice study, but they did studies on mice where they had like autistic like mice, right? Where they were very not social. And they gave the mice these particular strains of probiotic bacteria, and suddenly they were like really social again. They wanted to be interactive. They wanted to be a part of like the group and just, so I was like, that's fascinating. And so I looked for a probiotic that had those two. One of them is L. reuteri and one of them is L. rhamnosus. And so those two I focused on, and I'm sure that had to have helped. I didn't start that at the same time as I started the diet. I kind of started that a little bit later. And then we did do like some bentonite clay baths. I did add some bentonite clay into some drinks or smoothies for him here and there. I did some digestive enzymes but I wouldn't do those like long term, because you want your pancreas to be able to produce those enzymes on its own. But sometimes they can be helpful short term if like there's discomfort, right? We did that a lot when his stomach pain was bad. We tried that. Trying to think what else. We made sure that he was drinking water that had enough magnesium in it. Most drinking water today does not have enough magnesium in it, and it is literally drawing magnesium out of your body, because the natural state of water is to have a certain amount of minerals in it. If you go to a creek or river, it's running over all of those rocks, and it's actually water. If it's just H2O, like distilled water, right? It's somewhat corrosive, and it will actually wear down all of the minerals that are in these rocks and pick it up. And so kind of the natural state of water is that. And so that's what it's also doing in your body. There's studies on that showing that people who drink demineralized water will actually have more magnesium coming out of their bodies. It is anyway. So that's kind of a big one for us, is just making sure that the water we're drinking has enough minerals like magnesium, specifically silica. Professor Chris Exley, I don't know if you heard of him. He is a bioinorganic chemist. He has been studying aluminum toxicity and publishing hundreds of papers on it for 35, 40 years now. And he worked with a team of researchers at Keele University in the UK. He ended up, basically losing his position, losing his funding, because he started looking into vaccines. But he has basically found that the only real effective way, or one of the most effective ways to get aluminum out of the body, is by drinking silicone-rich mineral water, like naturally silicone-rich. And so you can't just like for example, horsetail is an herb that has a high level of silica in it, but it's not necessarily in the right form to bind to aluminum. And then there's, what else? There's diatomaceous earth, same thing. It has high silica, but it's not necessarily in the right form. Mm-hmm. Water like Fiji water, for example, has a higher level of silica, but it's a naturally occurring silica in the water in the form of silicic acid. And that is what is drawn to aluminum. Aluminum is drawn to silicic acid, and then it can be excreted from the body via the kidneys. And so that's something that I was trying to do as well, here and there with him, trying to focus on that. But yeah, aluminum is naturally occurring in the Earth's surface, and it's typically bound to silica. And so that's kind of the reasoning behind why silica is so good to help draw that out of the body.
Ashely, you've spent a lot of time talking about aluminum specifically, and this is one of the main ingredients in vaccines. I'd love to dive in a little bit more into some of these ingredients and the toxicity of like the most common ones that we see, or that you've discovered and researched.
Right. So aluminum is used as an adjuvant, and what that means is it triggers the immune system to attack the contents of the vaccine. Right. So if you were to just take a look at that for a moment, right? Think about that for a moment. Why would the immune system attack? Right? It's just very simple. Very, very simple. Most people don't realize this when they're just talking about it. They call it an adjuvant. They don't call it like something toxic that your immune system doesn't like, right? So in and of itself, an adjuvant is toxic. It's meant to make the immune system go, oh my gosh, what's going on? We need to attack this, because vaccines are made using inactivated stuff, right? And they try to make sure that whatever's in the vaccine is not going to infect you, but they need something that's going to make the immune system attack, right? So that in and of itself, knowing that the aluminum is used for that purpose, it's kind of nonsensical to say that it can't be toxic, it can't be harmful, right? It's your immune system is intelligent, and it's correctly identifying it as toxic, as harmful. It's trying to figure out what to do with it, right? And this is one of those things where the aluminum that's used in vaccine, the particular compounds were back in 1975. Okay, so before 1975, they started using aluminum in all kinds of applications in industry. And it's, Professor Chris Exley calls it like the aluminum age, right? Because they started seeing, oh, we can use it for this, we could use it for that. And, you know, it's used for so many things. And so in 1975, the FDA basically said that they were going to put 11 different aluminum compounds on this list called a GRAS list, which means generally recognized as safe. Okay, GRAS. And they didn't have to do the kind of testing that they should have done in order to include them in vaccines, include these compounds in vaccines. And you can find those compounds right there on the list: aluminum hydroxide, aluminum phosphate. Those are the ones used in vaccines. Now, so like I said, they never had to do the proper testing because they just were saying, oh, that's generally safe. Sure, you can use it for that application.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Those generally accepted as safe are when ingested and not injected, like as if they went through your digestive system.
Right. Yeah, they never did the studies to determine what it would be like when they're injecting it into your body. Like, for example, in toxicology, in order to even begin to determine what is a safe level, you have to do tests trying to figure out what is the no observed adverse effect level. Okay, it's the NOAEL. It's NOAEL.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically, you're supposed to just use these cells and get the dose down to like where they can't see any adverse effect, right? And then they could say, okay, well, we know that there's this level that it's safe, at least. Then we can do all the calculations and do further testing after that to see, well, long term, what would be safe. They do rat studies and then they have to do human studies after that, or they just try to extrapolate the data to humans based on animal studies. None of that was done. None of that was done when it comes to injecting aluminum into the body. And for example, there's been a critical analysis of the different studies that they do use to say, oh, well, these studies show that the aluminum in vaccines are safe. So there's a handful of studies that were mostly based on, like what you said, Mike, ingested aluminum, right? They did this maximum contaminant level or whatever. I'm trying to think. I know it was MCL. Yeah. Anyway, where they were trying to say, well, okay, so this is the maximum level at which, we can kind of dose somebody with this aluminum and it's still safe. So if we compare that to how much babies are getting and children are getting in their vaccines for the first 6 months or year of their life, it might dip above that level just a tiny bit at first, but then it goes back down right away, because we eliminate the aluminum in our bodies or through our kidneys and really, really fast within 24 hours. And, they have all these studies that just explain it all away as if it's just safe, right? But first of all, they're, again, using an ingested level of safety level that is from an ingested amount, not from an injected amount. They are assuming that all of that aluminum is in a soluble form, meaning it can dissolve easily in water. It's much easier to get out of the body, right? To eliminate from the body. But in reality, a significant portion of the aluminum that is used in vaccines is in a nanoparticle form. It's in a particle. It's not something that breaks down easily at all. It's almost insoluble. It's almost completely insoluble. Like long term, it's maybe a bit, but not, not soluble. And so, there's so many things I could say about it, but there's this really great study that Exley did along with a couple of other researchers who have been studying aluminum adjuvants for a while now. And thankfully, they published a study, they broke it all down, and I could share that at some point with you guys. But but yeah, it just kind of debunks this whole idea that aluminum was ever tested for safety, that it actually is safe now. Um, aluminum is linked to so many health issues. Obviously, it's, in the most basic information about it, we know that it is neurotoxic. Um, the CDC from, years and years ago, I think like 2007 or something like that, they did they made this whole document, they put this whole document together about aluminum and its toxicity. And the whole ingestion versus injection argument is so important because even in that document, they say, when you're injecting aluminum into the body, you are 100%, obviously, 100% absorbing that aluminum, right? Now, what happens to it afterward is a different story. Where it goes, if it's eliminated or not, they claim it's basically fully eliminated, or at least half of it's eliminated in like less than 2 days, and that it ends up getting eliminated over the course of maybe the next week or so. We know that's not true, especially when we look at the nanoparticle form of aluminum that they're using. And again, they're not even using the right form. They're not even using the right form in these studies. They'll use like aluminum citrate, which is not even close to the aluminum hydroxide, aluminum phosphate. There are some specialized adjuvants that are used in some vaccines. So, but back to that CDC document, they say, okay, 100% is absorbed when injected. Only 0.4% is absorbed when you ingest it. Okay, so our digestive tract is pretty good at trying to,
Right.
Prevent us from absorbing something that toxic. And so obviously you don't want to ingest aluminum. It's always better to avoid it. But gosh, that makes so much of a difference when you're comparing, for example, how much they try to say, oh, well, babies get more aluminum in their formula or from breast milk than they would from vaccines. And that is just not true. Like they do get quite a bit from formula. I will say that. And sadly, because we are all, we're all being exposed to toxic junk in our environment regularly. Yes, there can be some aluminum in breast milk, unfortunately. But again, we're talking about it being ingested. 99.6%, sorry, my brain doing the calculation, 99.6% of the aluminum goes right through you, right? You're not absorbing it. But you're injecting this into the body, like systematically into infants during critical neurodevelopmental stages of their life. And then it drains to lymph nodes, gets carried around the body, eventually gets deposited in the brain and accumulates in the brain. And the crazy thing is, there's so much research on this connecting aluminum to autism, for example, and other neurological disorders, like Alzheimer's, for example. For example, in autism, it's known that there's this disruption in the cerebellum, okay, in that region of the brain. Where does aluminum like to get deposited? The cerebellum, okay? And it's like the symptoms of aluminum toxicity are like nearly identical to like the symptoms of autism, like, and when it comes to motor function and things like that, right? And maybe brain fog and not being able to think clearly. And just, there's a lot of, I've done a lot of comparisons there, and it's like, it's right there. It's all there. People just don't want to believe it, right? And they just haven't taken the time to really investigate it in as much depth as you need to understand it and really see what's going on there. I think there's just this block where people don't, like I said, they don't want to believe it. And they just assume that, well, all of the scientists, all of the doctors, they know better than me, right? So I should trust them.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's dangerous to outsource your authority,
Right.
as we're finding. That's aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the only one.
Right.
What else is in there that we got to be aware of?
Well, so, the flu vaccines, the multi-dose flu vaccines actually contain quite a bit of mercury.
In the
which
form
is
of
even more toxic.
thimerosal, right? Which is a
Thimerosal.
preservative. Yeah.
Yes. So, and then they say about that, well, it's not as toxic as, other forms of organic mercury, like methyl mercury, which accumulates in fish. That's where we're mostly exposed to that, right? The form of mercury in thimerosal is ethyl mercury. But the studies, when there are studies done that compare ingesting methyl mercury to injecting ethyl mercury, oh my gosh, so much more ethyl mercury gets deposited in the brain. So much more mercury gets deposited in the brain. And a lot of studies showing, neurological damage and harm from thimerosal. So there's that. I mean, thankfully, that's just in the multi-dose flu vaccines, but they used to be in like the DTP vaccine back in the 80s, and they're still giving that vaccine to children in developing countries. It's the most popular, most widely used vaccine is the DTP vaccine today, which contains both mercury and aluminum. And it's insane. Like I actually found someone whose child died 12 hours. He lives in Kenya. Their daughter died 12 hours after receiving DTP and polio vaccines. And, they can't do anything about it. There's nothing they could do. They're just shunned for even speaking about it, right? Anyway, so there's thimerosal. And then there is, polysorbate 80 is an additive that, basically helps keep things in solution, right? Keeps things from settling out. And so, but that they've found that polysorbate 80 is really good in other polysorbates. There's polysorbate 20, for example, that it's really good at solubilizing lipid membranes like the blood-brain barrier. So it's really good at helping drugs cross the blood-brain barrier and other compounds that shouldn't be crossing the blood-brain barrier. So if you're giving, a vaccine that contains aluminum plus the polysorbate 80, then that's additionally problematic. Okay. And then you have all of the the DNA and proteins from various and blood serums, right, from animals and other humans, right? You have the human aborted fetal cells that they're made with, that the DNA from those cells ends up in vaccines. You have bovine calf serum, right? Fetal bovine serum. There's literally blood from a cow that is used to nourish the viruses that are going into the vaccines, right? And it's like a witch's brew. Like the entire, like if you actually break down the ingredients in a vaccine, it feels like a witch's brew. I say this a lot because that's what it looked like to me when I was originally looking through everything. Aborted fetal cell DNA, cow's blood. You've got DNA from the fall army worm going in one of those vaccines, right? You've got Chinese hamster ovary cell DNA. You've got DNA from a Cocker Spaniel in one of the flu vaccines. Okay, it's like, and then it's a little mind blowing, like guinea pig cells, um, and then a lot of synthetic compounds. There are other adjuvants that are used too, that are new that have their own issues, that probably haven't been investigated properly. It's like eye of newt. Gonna throw that in there, it's just, I might as well. It wouldn't be crazy. It wouldn't be crazy compared to like what they're actually doing. I mean, when they obtain fetal bovine serum, they puncture through the heart of an unborn calf and draw out their blood. I mean, it's like, what are we doing? It's just like knowing that they're doing this and knowing that babies have been aborted and obtained specifically to have cells for vaccine production is a bit mind-blowing.
The fact that this information at this point is readily accessible, what is equally mind-blowing is that there continues to be incredible pressure on parents to vaccinate their kids, and then also on adults to stay up to date. And what have you found that is behind the relentless pressure to get everyone vaccinated?
I mean, there are definitely people out there who are terrified. They've been conditioned to believe that vaccines are the only thing that is keeping our entire population from dying of measles, or, all babies from dying of whooping cough and all of that. Definitely, there are just everyday people who believe those things. Otherwise, though, I mean, I hate to be the conspiracy theorist person, but the drug companies are just powerful. They have so much money to waste on all of the things that they do to convince people that vaccines are necessary, safe, and effective. Like you mentioned earlier, for example, there are CDC officials who end up getting jobs at Merck, like Julie Gerberding. Um, Back in the early 2000s, when they did the MMR autism study, which was, we found out later was fraudulent. Julie Gerberding was the director of the CDC at that time. And years later, Merck gave her a position as the director of their vaccine division. And Merck makes the MMR vaccine. And that happens so much. The FDA doesn't have to investigate the clinical trials that the manufacturers are doing. And so, like Bobby Kennedy says, these are captured agencies. They're doing the bidding of the pharmaceutical industry, and they're supposed to be protecting the people, but they're not. They're kind of just manipulating the people into taking more of these drugs, more of these medicines and these vaccines that have serious, significant risks to them. But yeah, the drug companies have so much to lose if they are not able to mandating vaccines, right? Like no other drug or pharmaceutical product is mandated and children forced to take it in order to get into schools. Obviously there are exemptions, but in some states, like no. California, they have completely taken away.
New York as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they have a lot to lose if people wake up and realize they're not even, it's not that they're not safe. They're not effective and they're not necessary. I mean, yeah, like I can go on and on that why they're not safe and all the evidence about why it's not safe to take these vaccines, but they're not even effective. Like I'm teaching a class right now actually to 18 high school aged kids at a homeschool co-op locally on vaccines.
And wow,
And
amazing.
I taught like 3 or 4 classes just on the effectiveness aspect of it, because when you really dig deep into how they even determine whether or not a vaccine is effective, it's not. They're not. I mean, you can't. They've basically taken credit. When we, like you talked already with your previous podcast, the vaccines took all the credit for something they didn't do, right? So if people know that and understand that, then gosh, vaccines are like, I don't know, like on $100 billion a year industry at this point.
And that's just the drug itself. Then you have to think about the ramifications and the injuries and the disease and the chronic illnesses that come from,
Right.
we would argue, that come from the incessant vaccination. And that is how many billions just to deal
Right.
with peanut allergy, just to deal with all these kids who come down with autism.
Right. There's autism, there's thrombocytopenia, there is Guillain-Barré syndrome, there's juvenile arthritis, there's so many
asthma.
kids. Yeah, asthma, allergies. There's so many kids that end up having severe reactions, febrile seizures or other types of seizures. They end up in the hospital, and that hospital bill, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the doctor gets paid, the hospital gets paid, they have to pay for the testing, whatever else that they did. It's a huge moneymaker.
Yeah.
Huge moneymaker.
I understand the financial incentive. You have these massive drug corporations, and they've got this incentive, financial incentive, and then of course they can pay for the media and the advertising to promote the safe and effective, and also stoke the fear. So I also understand on the parent side. I've been there. Mike and I have both been there, having kids, and you just don't know at that point, at that moment in my time, I didn't know enough. I was starting to learn enough, and there's a lot of fear. You just don't have all the answers. Where I get most disappointed, though, is in the medical professionals who are actually doing the injecting, the pediatricians. And what is behind that? I mean, is it just a lack of knowledge? I hear about the pediatricians understand and are given the schedule, but they are not taught how to recognize an adverse event. They're not
Mhm.
trained on reporting the adverse event. Maybe they're even de-incentivized. And then also they're financially incentivized to make sure that their patients are all up to date on their vaccines, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything that you said there. There was in 2019, there was this global vaccine safety summit in Geneva, Switzerland. And this, I can't remember her name right now, but she was speaking at this conference, and she was the director of the Vaccine Confidence Project. Okay. Like for the World Health Organization. And she like was quoted. I mean, I have this video recording of her saying this, and it's like, wow, thank you for admitting what we all knew. Um, Basically saying that doctors don't know enough to like respond to these parents who have questions about vaccines. They don't know what to say because they receive less than a half day's worth of instruction. They're lucky. Sorry, she said doctors are lucky to receive even a half day's worth of instruction on vaccines in medical school. A half a day. Can you even really go through even the CDC schedule at that point?
Hmm.
I mean, that's a I could spend an hour just on, the CDC schedule. Um so yeah, what they learn about is they learn about the CDC schedule, what the vaccines are given for, that vaccines saved lives, that people would die without them. They do not learn about the ingredients. They do not learn about the safety testing. They do not learn about how they're even tested for effectiveness. They don't learn how, the toxicity of those ingredients. They don't learn about adverse events. They don't learn about the vaccine package inserts and to actually look into all of the reported adverse events from the post marketing stage, right? Um, yeah, they don't learn about VAERS. A lot of nurses admitted, I did not know that the vaccine adverse events reporting system existed. They just didn't even know that it existed. Um, or the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, right? The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. They're not taught any of this stuff, right? And then, like you said, on top of that, there's insurance companies have these provider incentive programs. um, Essentially, it's like, okay, well, if you have, for example, 60% of your patients who are eligible to be up to date by age 2, right? If this year you have 100 patients who are going to be turning 2 years old, and 60 of those patients are fully up to date on their vaccines, then you get $400 per patient as a bonus. Okay. But if they get 59 of those kids up to date, they don't get anything, right? And I had looked into like, well, what's like a decent size practice for a doctor, a pediatrician, or whatever? And that could mean them missing out on like tens of thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands of dollars. So think about it. Like you're a doctor. You're taught in medical school that like, I mean, vaccines are great. Vaccines saved us from dying of all these diseases. They're safe, they're effective. They're like God's gift to mankind, practically. And then you get into your practice and you're like, oh my gosh, like, of course I want to give these kids vaccines, right? And then you start feeling like you have some patients come in, they want to decline vaccines. And then you're like, oh my God, seriously? Seriously, these people are believing YouTube videos and TikTok videos, and like they're going to cost me tens of thousands of dollars because they're just idiots, right? I mean, the average person, that's where they're going to go. I mean, that's how they're going to feel about it. And if they don't actually dive deep into it, like in an unbiased way, right? And the unfortunate thing is there's, the science, the published research has been pumped full of all of these studies that are like, vaccines are safe and effective. Vaccines are safe and effective. Vaccines are safe and effective. It's like brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Merck, right? And it's like, you have to go so deep to like, who funded this study and what were their methods? Did they, like, for example, there's two studies that I looked at. I was like, wow, this is insane. So they were looking at the DTaP or Tdap vaccine in pregnancy. And, it said the result of the study was, the conclusion was, oh yeah, it's safe. It's safe and effective. It's great. Get your Tdap vaccine in pregnancy, right? But if you look at the whole setup of the study was designed to only look at babies who survived, babies who were born, right? The health of babies who were born, their birth weight, all of that. They didn't look at spontaneous abortions. They didn't look at miscarriages. They didn't look at placental abruption or whatever, right? Any other issues that happened shortly after receiving the vaccine in pregnancy. If the baby died,
that's incredible.
That was tossed out of the data set because the baby didn't make it to birth. And so the whole study is like used as an example of how the Tdap vaccine in pregnancy is safe because the babies who survived and were born are okay.
Yeah.
It's like, but for how long? Right? For like the first few weeks? I don't know, right? And it's mind-blowing when you really dive deep into all of this stuff because no doctor, like you said, they're almost de-incentivized. Like they don't have time to look into this. They don't have time to report vaccine adverse events. Most doctors believe, oh no, I've never seen a vaccine adverse event. I've never seen it because they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what to look for. They don't understand that a febrile seizure a week later is a vaccine adverse event. They don't understand that 2 weeks later, if, I don't know, there's so many things that can happen. Usually it's within 1 to 2 to even 3 weeks later. And so they're not connecting those dots. When the HHS funded that study on the VAERS database, looking at how many vaccine adverse events are actually reported, and they found that less than 1% are reported. They were looking at a time period of about 30 days. Why? Because vaccine adverse events can take that long or even longer to develop. I mean, the CDC, they actually acknowledge, and the HHS, the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, will compensate families if, let's say, their child was injured by the MMR vaccine and developed thrombocytopenia like 2 months later, or developed juvenile arthritis within, 50 days or whatever, like, I can't remember the exact number of days, but they know that adverse events and chronic conditions can take time to manifest, right? It can take up to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 months almost. Like for example, the studies on aluminum, they found that autoimmune conditions from an aluminum containing vaccine, it can take up to like 10 years to manifest, which is insane because they found the aluminum still in the tissue where it was injected, causing problems. So anyway, everybody's immune system is different, right? It can take time. It can be quick. It could be within 15 minutes. We had, people dying of the COVID vaccine within 10, 15 minutes of getting the shot. And they say,
they were considered unvaccinated because they didn't have their second shot.
Yeah, right. That is actually true. They would call that a coincidence.
Yeah.
I remember an article that literally the title of the article said, "Woman receives COVID vaccine and dies 15 minutes later of something else. I was like, I was a little mind blown. I really, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So,
that's a Simpsons level headline.
oh yeah.
Ashely, you mentioned RFK Jr. earlier. What are your thoughts on him and his position at the moment?
Right. So, I know that a lot of people have conflicting opinions on it, and I do believe that he is trying to work towards what will be a good thing for just what we've been going through, what we've been fighting for a long time when it comes to, hopefully, I'm hoping that, liability for vaccine manufacturers will be rolled back. That would be nice. I mean, that would fix a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
That would fix a lot of things. So
Well,
I'm
just
hoping for that.
if I could interject, that would put them out of business. I mean, that was their argument for having that immunity in the first place. They said we will go out of
Exactly.
business because they were drowning in lawsuits.
Right. And some of them had.
Yeah.
Some of the manufacturers stopped making the vaccine, then DTaP or DTP back in the 80s because of that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right.
Continue though. That's one.
No,
So that's
no,
one
that's a
thing.
really good
Rolling
point.
back immunity.
Yeah. I think rolling back the liability protections, that would be key. That would help fix a lot of things. I don't know what is going to happen. I am someone that's like hopeful, but also skeptical. And I understand that I don't know everything. I don't know all the ins and outs of what's happening inside the HHS right now. I am connected to people who worked for Bobby Kennedy's campaign. And so I've spoken with them, and they're very hopeful, very, very hopeful. They're like, wow, this is actually happening. Right. Obviously I'm not in it to that extent, but I'm kind of the opinion, like, let's give it some time. Let's see what happens. I think we are going in a positive direction. I feel like the scales have been tipped. You know what I mean by that? Like, it only takes like a certain percentage of the population to believe something, know something, to integrate that into their lives before that teeter-totter starts tipping the other way, right? And I do believe we are at that point, especially with COVID, just what happened with COVID. So many people, so many new parents waking up to how the government was just flat out lying to people, right? Even my own mom, it was so funny. The big COVID. I remember she kind of was in the medical system, and she was skeptical of vaccines, but she still kind of had this understanding that, like, oh, well, like, our government wouldn't just straight up lie to us, right? And the beginning of COVID happened when they started saying we're going to have to shut down, and then they started extending, right? They started extending that lockdown. She was just like, they are lying to us. And it was just interesting to see it real time, right? To see people waking up in my family. To just the corruption and that level of corruption, right? And the coordinated corruption. I like to go back to, like, people think, well, not all doctors are in on it. No, not all doctors are in on it. A lot of them genuinely want to help people, and they don't know any better because they've been conditioned to believe one thing, like almost religiously, right? And because it's such a sensitive topic, because we're talking about children dying, right? Nobody wants kids to die. And if you think that this is going to kill them, and you think that's going to kill them, and those are opposing things, I mean, that is going to be very heated, right? So I don't know. It's people are, man, I just like, my brain is like, where was I going with that? But it's, I don't know. I think that a lot of people have woken up because of COVID, because of how intense that was. And the scales are tipping. I really believe that. I think that the problem is, is that these drug companies know that. And I think that there are a ton of influencers,
Right.
ton of paid influencers these days that are out there to just terrify people and to attack the anti-vaxxers, to make them look like idiots, to infiltrate our movement, and to start getting people to believe things that seem like there's some truth woven into it, but the basis of those beliefs are not true. And I think we have to be careful of that. That is my concern, because I feel like if we can focus um, our efforts on educating people on things that are verifiably true, like verifiably true, easy to demonstrate based on showing them on like the CDC website, for example, or on the package insert, or on VAERS, or on whatever. It's when we start getting into these kind of side conspiracies, or and we kind of get sidetracked into like, oh well, there's this and there's that, and they must be lying to us about this. And I'm believe me, like I think it's interesting to learn about those things, and some of them I question myself, right? But I do feel like, unfortunately, I'm not going to name names right now, but there are some people who have kind of risen to prominence in guiding people to believe certain things, and it's not doing us any good. I think that that's purposeful. They're trying to kind of derail our movement and make us look like we're a little crazy. Right? I think anytime there's a new claim out there that sounds crazy, you have to be really careful, really, really careful to investigate it first before sharing that issue. And even then, it's like, well, if our goal here is to get those people who are like on the fence, get those people who are open to the idea that vaccines are not what you've been led to believe, right? Then we're not going to reach them by being super extreme about something, right? Even if it sounds extreme to say don't get a vaccine ever because there's no benefit to it. Like that I would have sounded extreme to myself, years and years ago. But I feel like sharing the information that goes along with that is really important in a reasonable way, not in an inflammatory way. I hope that makes sense. I think that it's important to kind of focus on the solid stuff. So anyway,
I think that makes a lot of sense, Ashely, and I applaud you. I think that's one of the reasons I was really excited to bring you on, is because you've really just you've stayed in this, you've stayed on this. You are just hammering on exactly what you said, the things that I can demonstrate, the things that we can point to, factual, and that ultimately, I mean, I look at like RFK taking this position, just the permission to have these conversations, it feels like there's greater permission publicly to have these conversations and these debates, and to start to put this information in front of people without instantaneously being labeled a conspiracy theorist. Like that to me is progress. Whatever else happens, the fact that this is now national conversation, I think is huge progress. And I really do applaud you for all that you've done to just continue to hammer on these basics, these fundamentals, which, when widely accepted or accepted enough that it tips the scales, is going to have a profound impact on the health of our country, our fellow humans worldwide. So I applaud you on that. I want to bring it back to you, Ashely, and we're going to ask a question because I know we're coming up on time here, and this is a question that we ask all our guests. I want to see where you go with this. So, what are your non-negotiables, the daily habits that you do to tend to your terrain?
So I might be a little less interesting on this one, because here's the thing. Because my background's in toxicology, right? I've had my own health issues, and I've had to be pretty strict with myself when it comes to diet. Okay. I am all about the basics, all about doing what naturally makes sense. Okay. Like getting some exercise throughout the week, getting enough sleep, trying to not, let stress get to you, doing your best to manage that, right? Those basics are so massive, right? I think we just don't realize how important it is just to get outside and get sunlight, go for a walk, to kind of make sure that oh my gosh, just your relationships in life, right? Your relationships in life, if you're having stress from your relationships, that affects everything, right? And then, yeah, diet. I had to be really, really, really strict with myself for a long time because I had Hashimoto's, which is, thyroid autoimmunity. I had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. I had cystic acne. I had super dry skin. I had eczema. Um, I was severely anemic. I would almost pass out if I bent down to pick up my kids' toys. I had cysts in my wrist, in my ankle. I had digestive issues. So, it was not just like my journey into starting to learn about vaccines kind of started way back when I was like, gosh, like I really want to get rid of this cystic acne and other things, Um, and yeah, so I've been more strict with my diet than most people I know. And it has turned so much around, I will say. I so thankful that I chose to do that. But when it comes to like now that I'm at a point where I feel like I'm at a pretty good place, I don't have to deal with those issues nearly as much, like once in a while. Um, for me, I think that unless you have, a serious health condition, yes, I absolutely think you should be strict with yourself. You should look at it like you're getting your body healthy again. Don't do what is going to like just like you want that pizza, right? You want that like whatever else is like enticing you, that donut, whatever. Um, but man, in those times, it's like figure out what you can enjoy that is actually healthy. And I had to do that most. And so I kind of focus on that. Like, what can I, if I'm like wanting something that's really almost like a dessert, I will figure out how to make it a healthy dessert, like a whole food healthy dessert. And I will, and to where it's like actually very satisfying. So that's important to me is like enjoying your life, because if you're eating healthy and you're almost resenting it, that's not going to work, right? That's not going to work. The resentment and the frustration and that stress of not being able to eat the things that you enjoy, that's going to be difficult, right? I also understand though, we all want to like get rid of all the toxicity in our life, right? As much as possible. And yeah, there's a lot that we kind of need to do and should do in order to reduce our toxic burden that we're exposed to every day. But I will say that as a toxicologist, it's almost a good thing to an extent when you're exposed to certain levels of toxic things in your life, because it's just like anything else. When you exercise something, you can get stronger at it, you can get better at it. I'm not saying that like getting a vaccine with a bunch of aluminum in it is like an exercise for like being really good at detoxifying. That's not what I mean, right? Like unnatural exposure to something can actually help. It can actually help. So you don't want to be in a pristine environment. We were not meant to be in a fully pristine living environment with no toxicity whatsoever, okay? Because then our bodies would be like, the moment we're exposed to something,
Yeah.
we're gone.
Yeah.
So there's that side of it that I think could help people possibly to feel a little less stressed about all of what they're exposed to in their environment. Okay. I fully believe as long as you're giving your body enough nutrients, as long as you are exercising, getting good sleep, getting sunlight, all of those things, that you are things are going to improve. Like not everybody is going to be able to experience benefits or improve their conditions on just doing that. But most people, I do think that is the basics are so critical. And, it's hard for me. Like I am a night owl. And so I will be up very, very late. So the sleep aspect of it is hard for me, but it is very critical. And so I guess my non-negotiables are do the basics. Do the basics, and do them in a way that's not stressing you out.
Yeah.
Do them in a way that like you're thankful to do them, you're happy to do them. One thing I do every night is pray with my kids and just remind all of us to like how thankful we should be. I think just having gratitude is another side of this that's really important. thinking about all the things that you're thankful for is a huge one for me. I think it can shift your whole outlook on life. It can help you with stress, can help you with any other things going on in your life, help you sleep better, you know. So I'm really big on that as well.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautifully said. Beautiful list.
Yeah.
Ashely, in addition to Vaccine.Guide, which is an incredible resource, where else can the listener learn more about you and your work?
So I do have a website called everlyreport.com, and it was a little bit more on top of it during COVID. It was a little crazy. I was just like, but every now and then I will continue to publish articles there. And I recently posted an article. It wasn't really an article, but it was basically a description of what I recorded a presentation on MMR and measles, and I did that recently because of the measles outbreak in Texas, and everybody's kind of freaking out about it. And so I published that recently on my everlyreport.com website, and I have a lot of other articles there, including one about how I became anti-vaccine, and one on the pertussis vaccine, one, a couple on the COVID vaccines, one on the meningococcal vaccine. Yeah, and it's everything is linked, all the sources, and hopefully those are good reading for people. I have had some people thank me because they had shared, my article on the Pfizer COVID vaccine when it first came out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for this! Like, it convinced my father-in-law not to not get vaccinated." So yeah, people just need to know. People just need to see the actual information, and then they can make their own decisions. And typically when they're educated, they're going to say, wow, like, this is not what I thought it was. And they're going to pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you're doing the Lord's work. That is for sure. Ashely Everly, thank you so much for joining us on the Terrain Theory podcast. This has been incredible and a real pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Welcome everybody to the after party in the Pineal Room. Brother Mike, how are you?
We're great. We're great. Just before we hit go, you said, "Do you remember this episode?" And folks, we're doing this after party, a few days later.
Yeah.
And I am finding, Ben, doing this it's kind of like, for a long time on tour, I remembered every gig I played, like every room. It's like, yeah, that room in that town. But now we've done so many of these that it's starting to become a little bit of a blur. And I had to sort of bite my bottom lip, like, okay, who are we talking about? We're doing a lot.
Is it because we're doing a lot, or is it the aluminum?
It's catching up with me.
Catching up with you.
Seriously, it's the aluminum. You're right. You nailed it.
Yeah, I nailed it. Well, I mean, it's like the number one culprit, isn't it?
Seems like it.
Right?
For mental cognitive stuff, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting when you take a look at the vaccine topic, and I just never found myself at any point in my life until all this stepping back and going, wait a minute. What is this procedure? Like, what are we doing? What is this what are we shooting into our blood?
Yeah.
I had that cut in my leg in a Spartan race, just a branch like shoved right through the front of my shin. And it was bleeding like for the rest of the race. And I went to the tent after the race and like, yeah, you should probably go to urgent care. Like, this is a big one. This is more than we can handle. Urgent care. This is like in my late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Urgent care. Like, when was your last tetanus? I have no idea. Like, so I don't give them a clear answer. It could have been last year and I just forgot. And I'm like, well, we'll just give you another one. And I'm like, all right. I didn't think twice. I was like, oh, thank God I'm not going to get tetanus.
Yep.
Never once thought to ask. And you're not really taught it at any time growing up. Like, you go for these shots when you're a kid, and then maybe as you're getting close to going into college, and not once was there a conversation about like, wait, tell me how this works again. Like, what is in that thing? Tell me all the ingredients and what's in it.
It's blind trust.
It's blind trust. And then, we're just at a point now where people have stepped back and asked that question. What's in this again? What's in it? Okay. Aluminum. and you got some mercury. I thought mercury wasn't so good for you. Let's explore why you think that injecting mercury is a good thing. And same thing with aluminum. What? I'm sorry. So show me the safety studies again. And they're like, well, here are the safety studies. Oh, this is all ingested. Isn't there a difference between It's just, finally people are asking these questions and showing the truth. And I'm very thankful for it. It's just incredible to see how this whole machine snowballed and was just accepted. Like how accepted it's been, and it's a testament to human nature, I suppose, to look at people in authority, figures of authority, and just blindly, as you said, blindly trust them.
Mm-hmm. Well, kudos to you for getting Ashely on, because this was an idea we had a month or two ago to really dive into the ingredients, what is actually in these vials. And I think you found a perfect guest to present this information.
Well, that's credit to Kelly, because I mentioned it to Kelly and she's like, hey, you should get Ashely
Right
on here.
Shout out Kelly. Thank you, Kelly.
Shout out Kelly. So Vaccine.Guide is the resource. And I think anyone listening to this, hopefully my end game, my goal with a episode like this is that it is something that people can listen to and then share.
Yes.
Because they know someone else who's starting to go down this rabbit hole or just starting to ask these questions. Maybe they're about to have kids. Maybe they've got kids. Maybe they know someone who's going to have kids. And they're like, listen, you should just think about this. Think about this topic before you do anything. Yep. Here's a conversation with a woman who's put together a resource. Here's that resource. That's the ultimate goal. Is like, how many people can we help? How many kids can we save?
That's what we were aiming for. We wanted kind of a 101 level episode that was very shareable, that wasn't, for lack of a better term, super red pilled. Just an introductory conversation on what's in these things.
Yeah. And as I told her afterwards, I just think that she's a perfect spokesperson.
Yeah.
I think that she's a wonderful spokesperson for this topic. I said movement to her, but ultimately it's really just a topic.
Sure.
Hot button topic. And some people can navigate it and present the information really, really well. And she, I think, is one of them.
Yeah. Right in line with Jody Meschuk, right? Had a vaccine injured child and then just dove in. And man, that story she told about, even though her intention was to not inject her daughter, she can't even be sure that she wasn't injected behind her, surreptitiously. That's some dark shit, dude.
It is. Yeah.
That took me off guard. Even a woman who is aware and proactive in doing her due diligence, you turn your back for a second and they'll put that needle in your kid.
Yeah, you only think about hospital births. I didn't have it for Grayson. I don't know if it's still the case, but it seems like there's a period of time where that kid is just gone, like taken from the arms of the mother, and then who knows what's done with it.
Yep,
that's crazy.
Yep. Or it's with Will, Ruthie had. It's so funny. I was just go along to get along guy back then. Like I trust the doctors. She's got this sort of blood type, tested positive for this. That means this. We're going to have to shoot him full of antibiotics because of this. It's like, okay. And I remember seeing newborn Will in the hospital, like as tiny as a baby could be, day one, and his fucking arm is all wrapped up in gauze and he's got an IV in. It's like, and I just thinking like, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's just better safe than sorry is what they tell you. But yeah, there was an awful lot of intervention going on. Knowing what I know now, it's like an insane amount of intervention. And Opal was born right in this room I'm sitting in right now. And they have very different demeanors, those children. I mean, they're both wonderful and brilliant and talented and social, and they're great. I think they're great kids, but their demeanor is so different. And that could be for a myriad of reasons. But one of the things I do go back to is the home birth was chill as fuck, and the hospital birth was not. It was not. We tried to make it so, we brought music in, we sang to Will. We made it as great as we could, but very, 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 very different.
Yeah. How about like the first 2-3 years of life? Was there a difference?
Oh God, it's
hard to remember.
It's a little hard to remember, honestly. when Will was like young, like, you remember because you hung out with him back then,
I
like when
did.
he
I
was like
remember
2, 3, 4,
remember
5.
bouncing him around in
Yeah.
the
He was
studio.
he was a goofy, jolly guy.
Yeah.
I will say though, while we're on the topic, and it's funny, I've almost like resisted doing this because I know what I'll find, but like, we thought we were being progressive by doing a delayed schedule because I didn't look into it. I just decided. I didn't decide. Ruthie's like, well, I've heard some things, but we're just going to do a delayed schedule. That felt progressive at the time. Like, okay, we're doing a delayed schedule. I remember Will being he's had quite a bit of illness in his youth, these years, these last, I feel like he's getting better, but like there was even a few years ago, asthma was still a thing. Like we'd go on like a walk in the wintertime when it was cold and like he'd have to sit down and catch his breath. Carried an inhaler around. There was one Christmas, maybe when he was like 9 or 10, he was so sick, he couldn't even get out of bed on Christmas. Like a 9-year-old on Christmas Day, you're up before your parents. You just can't. And he was in a malaise. And I would love to look at the injection schedule and be like, yep, probably that September, he had a bunch of shots put into him. And by Christmas time, he's detoxing hard. When he was a baby, we had a trip down to Florida where he was like vomiting and feverish. And we ended up in the emergency room down there, and they put him on this horrible pink antibiotic that they thought babies would like because it's supposed to taste like bubble gum. It's like babies don't eat fucking bubble gum. Like first of all, but like, it was a shit show. And like he probably had some shots before that trip, knowing what I know now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, in a sense, I see the detox mechanism for what it is. It's not that, my kid was sick a lot when he was a kid. It's, we injected him with a bunch of garbage and he had to push that shit out all the fucking time.
All the time.
That's how I look at it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish that I could go back. I mean, like you, I wish that I could go back and look at my childhood. I remember distinctly, I think I've told this story when we were living in Pittsburgh. I remember being in school, elementary school.
Yeah.
And I remember having a stomach ache so bad I had to go to the nurse's office, and I was in the fetal position in the nurse's office for hours.
Wow.
And I don't remember ever having a stomach ache that bad. And I'd love to know
the schedule.
I'd love to know where I was on that schedule. Is that the case? I don't know if that was the reason, but I would just love to know. I'd love to connect again.
Yeah, man. I'm right there with you. I remember I was a little older. I was in high school, and I always blamed it on you remember how I was such a busybody in high school? Like I played 3 sports, I did the musicals, I was in bands. Like I've said it before, like any extracurricular thing I could get my hands on, I did it because in a sense, it was maybe a distraction from like some things I was feeling, but also it was a way to not have the emphasis be on schoolwork. It's like, look how good I am at all this other shit. But I remember being so exhausted and brain fogged. I had this vivid memory of sitting in the cafeteria at Oyster River High School during like a study hall or something. And I couldn't think straight. I was like, how am I going to do this work? Like and I just thought, well, you had practice last night and you were up early and you're just tired. That's what I always told myself.
Yeah.
But like you just said, I would love to match that up against the injection schedule and just see why is this brain fog manifesting?
I don't remember you being brain foggy. I remember you being pretty sharp as a tack in high school.
I think it's something I kept to myself, but I was really insecure, and I appreciate you saying that.
Never missed a chord for scrotum.
I kicked ass at the extracurricular stuff. I knew where to put my voltage.
That's right. I will remember my freshman year in college, and I think when you go off to college, like one of the first things they do is make sure you're up to date, right?
Yeah.
My freshman year, late fall, early winter, I got mono, quote unquote, mono.
Yep.
Had to spend like 2 days in the nurse's office.
Yep.
At college, sweating through sheets. I just remember they had to change the sheets like every 4 hours because I was just sweating through them.
Yep. There it is.
Well, I don't know. What was that? Could have also been the alcohol.
Well,
You go to college.
What are they? It's toxic load, right?
Toxic load. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Toxic loads. I mean, speaking of alcohol and toxins, over the last like maybe 3-4 months, like had been definitely increasing the amount of alcohol I've been drinking. Just at a place in my life where I was like, oh, I can like reintroduce this like here and there, and maybe on a weekend night, going out to dinner or something, have a couple drinks, and slowly but surely it started to like just snowball a little bit. I felt like it was maybe having a little more control over me than I wanted. And I was really aware of how I felt. I've been trying to be more in touch with my body and my mind and the impact that this particular thing has had on my life. And I got to a point just recently when I was like, I'm done. I got to go back. I have to go back to this thing has no place in my world. And it was good to reintroduce it. And because I had some really nice like social times with it as sort of that like companion in that vehicle, as we've done in the past as adults. It was really nice to have that reminder that this is a net negative, and that if I want to be the best version of myself, I don't think that there's a place for that, except for like very rarely.
Yep.
So that's where I am, and I it's a hard thing to kind of admit, like as the co-host of the Terrain Theory, where we talked a lot about how we had like alcohol was just cut out completely from our lives, to say like, no, I actually let it back in. But here I am again going, no.
Yeah.
I maybe I just needed that reminder.
Yeah.
And so just cutting that toxin out. And it's funny, Mike, because just going like, boom, just done in the short amount of time that I've said that, maybe it's just the intention, but everything's sort of turned back around. Yeah. Like I've just like, okay, I'm refocused, re-energized. That thing's gone. And I'm not going to let it back in.
It's good. Good for you. Honesty is the best policy.
Honesty is the best policy. And you know what else too? Like we're not, as human beings, like I'm not certainly perfect. No. I try my best to like live that straight and narrow, like terrain focused, terrain first, terrain forward lifestyle. But things sneak back in. You can't always be perfect.
Dude. Yeah. And we are coming out of winter. And things are just, I feel like, especially keeping your vices at bay, it's just a little trickier during the long, cold winter.
It definitely can be, especially up here in the Northeast, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Vices are vices for a reason.
And I got to say, too, this sort of period over the winter coincided with me ditching my crappy sort of like $100 ice plunge. I was just getting mold, whatever it was having growth in it. I was like, I'm done with this. And the ability to set up the new one, the Nordic Wave one, shout out Dr. Rob Williams. It coincided this space where I had to stop cold plunging before I could resume cold plunging in the new unit.
Yeah.
And the cold plunging has almost like replaced that, increase in alcohol consumption.
So you had a lull in your daily cold plunge.
Had a lull.
And you noticed a massive change in just your overall well-being.
Yes. And now that I'm back and I got that cold plunge going again, it was like it was like literally cold water on the face, cold water on the body, to be like, I can't have it both ways. I can't, there's no place for this other thing in my life. I get that. And now just like back on the daily, jumping in that water. And
are you loving that new machine?
I am, because I don't have to worry about, one, the cleanliness of the water because it's constantly filtering.
Yep.
And then two, the temperature itself is just going to stay constant all throughout the summer. So I don't have to worry about like dropping big ice blocks in it and all that stuff, which never worked really.
Yeah. Dude, I was returning some towels that we got for Christmas at Kohl's the other day. I was exchanging them for a different color. And they were selling ice baths like on sale, just the junky ones you're talking about.
Yeah,
just like,
but they're there.
At Kohl's, like mainstream. I was like, you got to be kidding me! Like, yeah, people are ready for this.
Some will say though that, oh, if it's going mainstream, that means it's bad for you.
Yeah, so I would even say that. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's like, there's some of these adjacent things that just get a little traction. So did you ever get your water tested to figure out what was going on in there?
I never did. I never found, I couldn't find a lab that I felt would do it. And then I'm just like, it's sitting there on my countertop, like the little thing swimming through. I'm like, you know what? I don't. I'm done. I'm done. I'm just gonna throw. I'm just gonna throw this down the drain. I don't need to look at this stuff anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like
Yeah,
that energetically hanging around. Like,
didn't
just
like it.
move on.
No. And speaking of energetics, you got your the plasma energy station,
Oh yeah, I got my little vial from
Lynn.
from Lynn. So
Yeah,
thoughtful of her.
amazing. Yeah. So I have mine too. It's sitting
Yeah.
on the counter.
Yep.
I need to find the right sort of application for it because
Yep.
they say take that little vial of water and then like tape it or somehow affix it to a container that's going to have your water that you're going to drink or whatever. Spray on your
A
face.
see-through container.
A see-through container has to be transparent, right? Or translucent at least.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to just get a big jar to fill up with my water to put, and I don't have that yet.
Yep.
So I'm just waiting to apply it. Sounds like you've already.
Well, you reminded me that it needed to be transparent because I affixed it with a rubber band to my copper water bottle, and you're like, that I don't think that's how you roll. I think you're right. I was
Yeah.
just so excited. I was running errands. It just came in the mail. I was like, oh, I'm gonna strap this puppy on. But
Yeah.
I do have a nice glass water server right over there that I'm gonna fill up today. I do. I mean, I love my copper water bottle though. I mean, it's nice to have a lot of different types of water around. So I'm going to try the big glass carafe. I also thought the spray bottle's kind of a cool idea,
I agree.
right? I mean,
I
we're
agree.
already like misting with like the flower essences in
That's
a sense,
right.
and you can like give your kid a little spritz on their way out the door. Whatever. Oh, it's just water, just water.
Stop it, Dad.
I actually just bought some I hadn't bought this in a long time since we began our journey, but the Zach Bush Ion Biome Intelligence of Nature solution, which is basically humic and fulvic acid solution. It tastes like water, but I've just slipped a little bit in my son's water bottle this morning.
We're just dosing our kids.
Just a tiny little dose of
Oh my
humic and
God.
fulvic acid. Yeah, as Danny Perrott says, you got to be sneaky sometimes.
Your kids are going to have stories about you.
Oh my God, dude.
They are going to have stories about you.
I hope so.
You know what? I hope they end it with, but I'm glad he did it.
I hope so too.
I'm glad he did it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the things that it's funny because Opal was younger when I started this journey, so she's a little more receptive. As she's getting closer to teenage year, there's plenty of eye rolling that goes on. And now Willie, I feel like he was very resistant because of the age he was at when I kind of got red pilled in the health world. But I do feel like he's coming around because he's so smart. Like he's not dumb.
No.
And so he's gonna like just come to it on his own terms in his own time,
Yeah. Plus the sauna session, right?
Dude. Yeah. There was a round 2 of that he had a big weekend last weekend where he had a recording session did I tell you this story? He had a session in the city. His guitar player in his band, his name is Atomic.
Yep.
And Atomic's dad has a crazy legit studio in Brooklyn called Atomic Studios. And it's in the same building. It's the same studio that Spouse recorded back in the early 2000s, a record called Love Can't Save This Love. It used to be called Fireproof Studios. It's an old fire station. So now that's been refurbished to Atomic Studios. But Will sent me a little video of him like walking up the stairs, opening the door there. I was like, oh, good Lord. Like this isn't deja vu. This is his life. But like, he's literally walking in my footsteps, literally.
Yeah.
It was crazy town. So Will just made a record at Atomic Studios, or they made a couple songs. They recorded a couple songs. So proud of them. Picnic Committee. And then on Sunday, there was a big car show, the LZ World Tour something. I don't know shit about that scene, but he's so deep in it. So he went from Brooklyn to New Jersey to the LZ World Tour all by himself. Like that's a big trip. Big city, all by himself. His buddies went home after the session and he won like a chair, like a race car chair. So he's walking home with like this massive chair that's bigger than him. I mean, he was just crushing life, right? Oh, but the point is that Thursday before his big weekend that he was really looking forward to, he wasn't feeling great. I was like, and that was the day Brendan and Jude showed up to rehearse.
Yes.
And we got a sauna going in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And I told Will, hey, we're going to have a sauna around 3:00, right when you get out of school. You want to go? And usually when I ask him if he wants to do anything, he hesitates, often says no. But he knew. He's like, I got this cold coming on. You're doing a sauna? Yeah. And he showed up. So he stayed home from school that day. That's right. And then he went out to Kingston to get some part for his car. And he showed up on his own. Like, he didn't jump in with us. He just drove himself to the sauna.
Yeah.
And he saunaed for an hour. And he even had a Rock Academy rehearsal that night. I was just proud of him. Like, he knows.
Yeah.
He knows it's a habit to stack.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Dude, it's working.
And he got through the weekend. And honestly, this week he's not feeling great either, but he got through the weekend. Like, it got him through the weekend. It really did.
Amazing. Teach the children well.
Yeah, dude.
You're doing it.
Yeah. So are you.
A long game. It's a long game. It's the long game.
Yep. Consistency.
Oh my God. That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. Good shit.
Well, more to come, I suppose, right?
Hopefully.
They'll be telling stories about Dad.
Yeah. And
Dad dosing them with plasma energy spray water as you leave the door, but them getting straight A's on their tests.
Yeah. And Grayson's going to be like, my dad cold plunges every day, my entire childhood. Yeah.
He's gone in. He's done it very briefly.
Yeah.
He lasts about 5 seconds. He'll get there.
You remember when we went camping that time by the river and Opal jumped in the water, and it was a cold time of year, and we were like, Opal Wim Hof. Opal Wim Hof.
She totally Wim Hof. She was down.
She's more game for that than Willie is. I get it. That's a tough one. That's a tough sell.
It is.
The cold water. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, folks, nothing you heard here should be taken as medical advice, as neither Mike nor I are medical experts. Remember that you are light, you are love, and you are your primary healthcare provider. Thanks for tuning in, sticking with us, and we will catch you on the next one.